Hello. Vladimir Lenin once said that any society is 3 miles away from chaos. In the case of Oxford, 3 miles do not apply. Instead, if it wasn't for the student union, the all that would stand between the students of our great university and the abyss of mindless chaos would be a lack of contraceptives, student helper training, and internet radio. Someone has to be president of the student union to use the membership that we have to provide some meaning to this annual electoral rigmarole. This is an organisation that has a budget towards £1 million, and that for many can often seem a font of bizarre and infantile protest politics, perpetuated by a snobbish and disconnected clique whose actions often seem irrelevant to most students' lives. Every year, presidential candidates promise to change that. Every year, they seem to fail. So let's see if any of these four can do any better. I'm William Atkinson.
And I'm Freddie Wied, and welcome to the Oxford Blue Student Union Presidential Debate. In the grand tradition of presidential debates from across the pond, today's debate will see the four standing candidates go head-to-head to appeal for your all-important votes. Contrary to William's rather sour description, the Student Union exists to represent Oxford University students in the university's decision-making, to provide a voice for our students in matters of national higher educational policy, and provides direct services to the student body in areas ranging from consent training to student radio. In short, the student union really does matter.
If you say so, Freddie. Now, the format of this evening's debate is simple. We will ask all four candidates a question, with the candidates taking it in turn to answer first. Once they've begun doing so, they will have up to 90 seconds to respond. If they take too long, we will cut them off. On the other hand, if they are struggling to find 90 seconds worth of things to say consistently, we will consider reducing the maximum to 60 seconds later on in this debate. Now it's time to introduce our four candidates.
So to kick things off, we have Martin Pisansky, a third year reading law at St. Anne's College.
And then we have Rashimi Samant, who is reading for an MSc in Energy Systems at Linacre College.
And then we have Richard Mifsud, who is a graduate medic at Worcester College.
And finally, and last but no means least, Stefanos Iosifidis, I apologise if I pronounce them correctly, who is a finalist at St. Peter's reading philosophy and modern languages. So we have our candidates. Now it's time for the questions. Good luck to you all, and here we go. What personal qualities can you offer to Oxford students that the other candidates can't, and what makes your policies distinctive? For this first round of questions, we'll go to Martin first, followed by Mifsud, followed by Stefan, followed by Rashimi. So, Martin, please take it away.
Hi, thanks. First of all, thanks to all of you for organizing this, and thanks for everyone to coming. My experience, I think that with DSU for 2 years now, and I know every inch of the organization, which I'm going to know how to work for students and for everyone from my day one in office. I'm going to speak individually with every single JCR and MCR president, with student society presidents as well. And I am one of the candidates who has a breadth of ideas in terms of my experience and the policies that I've already announced. I'm going to focus on mental health, on new COVID-19 mitigation, on support for graduate international students, two areas where I've already worked as the chair of the International Students Campaign, as the president of the French Society. I'm going to work on lobbying for reforming our outdated assessment system, and I'm going to fight discrimination that many students face at Oxford. And to that end, I've announced many pledges, for example, introducing a new platform on the SU website where students can anonymously report any instances of abuse that they've experienced, either from staff or from other members of the university, and that then will be acted upon by SU officers who could then talk individually to colleges affected and make sure that every student is represented, and we act together to make sure that everyone is protected in the way that they should be. So basically, it's experience. It's me working both within DSU and with other student society, and it's me having pledges that are going to support every single student through both speaking with student leaders and through representing everyone else as well.
Thank you, Martin. Richard, next.
Hello.
Sorry. Yeah.
There we go. Hello, I am Richard Mifsud, and for those of you who haven't read my manifesto, it is very simple. If you vote for me, you're voting for no Oxford Students' Union president next year. So I am running on the campaign pledge that if elected, I would not take up the position, and I would write an email to the Oxford SU and to Oxford University saying that this position shouldn't be filled this year. So what personal qualities do I have? Well, I have the stubbornness to be able to write and say that. And that's basically all I need. I don't think I'll be a particularly great president if I were to take it up as a sabbatical position. And I don't endeavour to. So you might ask why. The reason why is that if you ask any Oxford student throughout the rest of the year as to what the Students' Union is doing for them, they tend to be slightly hazy and they tend to be unclear. And in particular, I just don't think it's worth spending £21,000 on a president's position. Because, for example, £21,000 could be used to buy 4,200 plastic chairs, which very nicely segues into my empty chair campaign. So my distinctive policy is that if elected, you wouldn't get a Students' Union president. I should add that if you do think that £21,000 is worth spending for an Oxford University Students' Union president, I wholeheartedly support that you pick one of these four candidates because they're all superb and all have wonderful campaigns. And so that's my pitch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miss. Rich, that was exactly 90 seconds, so that was very impressive. Can we go to Steph next?
Hi, yeah, thanks for having us all. First of all, I would like to say that, yeah, I'm Steph Iosifidis, and the other candidate is Rashmi, and she's got a great manifesto as well. I would like to say that I think I largely agree with Richard on lots of his points. I think the chair of the presidency normally gets bogged down in kind of technocratic details or doesn't say anything real. Which is why I'm running on the campaign to kind of foreground main left-wing student issues, which are everybody's issues, to do with mainly fair rents and fair wages. I want to set up a commission for that and let people know where we are and what the pushback is from the university, as well as just giving students a voice and making it very easy for them to have the choice on all the issues that affect them. So standardized sexual harassment, bullying, intermission, racism policies, as well as divestment policies. So we can block donations from those trying to launder their reputation and to make sure students aren't forced to work for those companies which are destroying our world, like the Shell Oil Labs and all the development partnerships with the maths and physics departments. So yeah, I think very easily the SU presidency can become a sinecure, but we should be using this presidency as a voice for students on the main issues and also to be engaging in broader national campaigns.
I'm going to have to cut you off there, Steph. Freddie, I think you've got the next question for our candidates.
Shouldn't we give Rashmi a chance?
Oh, no, sorry, yeah, completely sorry, Rashmi. I had my thing closed, so I didn't see your lovely smiling face while I was coming. I really apologise for that. Please, Rashmi, to your turn.
Thank you. I'm Rashmi. And what is this one quality that I bring to the table that would make me a good president? I believe that it's perseverance and patience. I understand that change is very slow. It's not as fast as we want it to happen, and it requires consistent efforts. And for me personally, getting here to Oxford and being a student here, coming out of a very small city in India, it took that kind of perseverance and effort of almost like a Herculean scale, I guess. So I think I do understand what it takes to bring change, because my journey to get here has been a sort of that kind of effort that it takes. What's one unique thing about my manifesto that others are not talking about? I think others are talking about, but not more like strongly, is decolonization of the campus and institutionally. I see so many statues around campus that are of Christopher Codrington, and I see the Rhodes Scholarship. I just want to ask you one question. If an organization would come up to you and give you a heap of money to set up a scholarship and say, I want to name this the Hitler Fund or the Hitler Scholarship, would you do it? then why are we still doing the Rhodes Scholarship? I mean, it's proven that it's all blood money, the blood of people who look like me, like with brown skin. And why do we still have it? And it's one thing that I'm very passionate about, and I've put in bold letters on my manifesto that it's one thing I would like to take down, the statues. But other than that, I've also worked as the divisional rep within the Oxford SU. I've also been a sabbatical officer back home, so I kind of get this job. So I'm going to hit the ground running. I have a plan and I won't be caught off guard. And as the MPLS rep, I've worked on various issues, small issues, in fact, like ensuring that we can have more library spots safely and stuff like that, which makes small difference to each student here now. So that's why I think I make a good candidate.
Thank you all. That was a fantastic start. I'm going to go round clockwise on my screen. I think that it should do the same for Will. So we have some consistency on who goes first, which means it's the next question will be for Richard first, then Steph, then Rashmi, and then Martin. Okay, so what involvement, some of you have already answered this to an extent, but to recap, what involvement have you had so far with the Student Union prior to today? And more importantly, what has that experience meant for you to feel that it needs to change? What about your experience has incited that within you? I'll go to Richard first.
Well, thank you for that. So my involvement of the Oxford University Students' Union has been relatively minimal. It is relatively symptomatic, dare I say, of most people's experience. The huge problem that Oxford Students' Union has, and it's not a problem that's the fault of Oxford Students' Union at all, is that effectively the JCR and the MCRs of colleges do most of the roles that a normal University Students' Union would do, and they do them very well. And yes, they do occasionally need some support from the Students' Union, the Oxford University Students' Union, which the Oxford University Students' Union sometimes does to greater and lesser extent. I'm just merely arguing that actually the stuff that the president doesn't need to be done by a paid position. And I'm arguing further that it's not, I'm not saying that the Students' Union president isn't totally irrelevant. I'm just saying it's not worth £21,000 and this money could be better spent elsewhere. Shockingly, I'm going to give you 60 seconds. So I think that's enough. Thank you.
I think that's appropriate. I think you all have so much to say and it's wonderful, but I think we might need to get the answers to be a little bit shorter because we've got quite a few questions to get through. So if you will bear that in mind, follow Richard's example on that, that'd be great. Steph, same question to you.
Yeah, sure. So in the interest of brevity, I'd say that most of my contact with the SU has been from the outside, from the side of organizing campaigns who wish they got more support and more help from the SU. I got this through my time at the Radical Forum when I was helping organize loads of the radical groups around Oxford. It was a consistent thing I was being told, that they weren't getting enough help and they weren't being heard really by the SU. But also when I was talking to the heads of the UCU during the strikes, there was a distinct feeling of underappreciation from them about the UCU's help and collaboration. So everything that I've come, all my experience from the SU has been in its shortfallings that have been communicated through those people working individually outside the union to try and make change. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you. Rashmi.
Yeah, so I currently work with the SU as the MPLS rep, and I think I've had a very positive interaction through that. But that being said, I feel that one of the major problems, issues, is that students don't participate and involve with the SU as much as is necessary for actual change to happen in a very collaborative manner. And there's a sort of disconnect, and we cannot like point fingers that you didn't do this, you didn't do that, but we can also think about what we can do, what we can try, especially now it's super complicated with everything moving virtually. At least before, the council meetings used to happen in person and that would give people an occasion to meet up and discuss ideas. But now with everything virtual, it just makes it very challenging for us to find that social connect and that sense of community. But yes, I think that's one major issue that I would like to mitigate by constantly pushing and making people feel like they belong and that their voices are important within the student union, and that they can approach us, and that there's more collaborative efforts between the students and the student union. It's also a little confusing, I'd rather say, in Oxford, because we have the college system, which is independent, and then you have the JCR and the MCR there, and then you have the SU. So there are these so many different organizations, and who do you go to? And then the gravity of every issue gets lost when it keeps moving from one part to another. So I would also like to address that, so that we kind of direct everything in a single direction, so that the gravity doesn't get lost and we all come together as a community.
Thank you, Rashmi. That's great. I think we'll come back to the idea of the JCRs within colleges later, but that's fantastic. Thank you very much. Over to Marcin.
Thanks. I think that's one of the most important questions. I've been a student council officer. I've been the chair of the International Students Campaign. I've been elected to a student trustee role in the last year's election. And I've also been on the media board, which is overseeing the Oxford Student and the Oxford Radio. And I think all of those experiences kind of show me what Richard has been talking about before, which is that the ESU is just extremely slow. It's not representative. JCR and MCR presidents are not showing up at council, which then means that the decisions that are actually taken are taken by a small minority of students. And if you look at the actual trustee boards, then I'm one of the only 3 students who is on the board. And most of the people who are actually managing the board, who are on it, who are voting on decisions that impact every single student at Oxford, are not current students, which goes back to my point that we need to reform it. We need to make sure that students are actually the ones driving change, that we can actually promote activism, that we can actually make sure that the SU acts fast and that it actually is representative of everyone. So if I'm going to be speaking with every single JCR and MCR and society president over the course of the year and not just during the election, then I think we can make sure that it is actually representative, that the officers actually know what they are talking about, and that students know that they can just reach out to the JCR or MCR president, and that they know that that JCR or MCR president is then going to speak with the SU president, and that that is actually going to mean something, as opposed to everyone just feeling that the SU is just a distant organization that exists somewhere. Most students don't even know where the SU building is. And I think that would be the way to change it.
That's great all around. Thank you so much, all of you. Okay, next question from me is Steph first, then Rashmi, then Martin, then Richard, which is, if you could take one problem, what do you think is the single biggest problem facing Oxford students currently, and what are you going to do about it? Steph.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's kind of like a double-edged issue, right? Prominent in my manifesto is both fair rents and fair wages. So I think the main issues that any kind of political union have to put forward are those which affect people's material conditions. I think when students are gouged for rents from colleges and from private landlords, which are completely unaffordable, like the most unaffordable in the UK, that puts people in a very difficult position, and it dissuades people from coming here and being able to live here comfortably. When our teachers and our staff are not paid enough, they cannot live. They have incredible difficulty and they strike. This causes not only incredible distress to them, but also to students whose education gets disrupted. I think some of the biggest issues are the material ones that we think that we cannot change because we don't have the power, and indeed because I think some SU presidents before haven't been as vocal on these issues and made it incredibly clear where the SU stands on them. So yeah, I think those issues, material ones on rent, and also understanding that staff working conditions are student learning conditions.
Great, thank you so much. Rashmi.
Hi, yeah. So I think there are, COVID has taken center stage when it comes to problems that anyone faces right now. And among this, I think one of the problems is one-year master students are feeling like they paid the whole fee. They got here in September and they're not getting any part of the Oxford experience, despite paying such a hefty fee and not getting back any money and still continuing to pay the same. International students, on the other hand, are feeling like they're left in limbo with mitigating circumstances coming, going, and with residency requirement coming, going. It's just so much in limbo, you know. International students have to plan their travel before, and it's not like we are traveling, commuting from London or something. We come from halfway around the world, and it takes a lot of planning financially also, because tickets are not cheap, especially now with the pandemic. So for this particular reason, I feel like what I'm going to do is, for 1 year master's student, I'm going to push for a special alumni status so that they can continue to have access to all the resources online, and also come and attend in-person events when they do open for a little time after they graduate, so that they somehow also do get a kind of their Oxford experience. Whereas for international students, I would like to push for the university to waive the residency requirement and to have the mitigating circumstances and safety net until the World Health Organization declares the end of the pandemic. Because even if the situation gets better in UK, we need to understand that we have an international community. There can be a student who has it really bad back home, and we just can't have residency requirement not waived or not in place because just because it's better in UK now. So I feel that these are the two things I really feel strongly about.
Thanks, Rashmi. On to Martin.
Thanks so much. So I agree with all of the statements made before, and definitely those important points. I think the one key issue I'm going to fight for is mental health. And that's been something that I've been posting about extensively over the weekend. And as someone who's struggling with this over the pandemic and before as well, and who's seen many of my friends struggle with mental health as well, I think that's something that kind of transcends all of the other issues that students are facing, whether that be just staying at home or not having the resources available that they need, or any of the other problems that we're facing at the moment. And to that end, I think there are many different things that DSU can do on the university level. We can push for more diversity and more counselors in a counseling service. So for example, I, as someone who is an LGBT person from a small town in Poland, would definitely need to have a different kind of support, and would probably feel more comfortable speaking to a different kind of a person than someone who is coming from a different background. So I think that would be something to work on. I think we would need to have more extensive consent training, because from what I've seen myself in my college, the kind of people who usually deliver those trainings are people who've been trained for 2 or 3 hours by DSU. And that's actually something that DSU is actually responsible for. So I think if we extend that, we're going to prevent a lot of issues like sexual abuse and sexual assault. And those are things that also impact mental health of many students for many years after a single incident that can occur. And other things that I was hoping to organize were support groups, where it matters a lot that we have more anonymity, and that DSU is definitely well placed to organize those. So I think that mental health would be one of those key issues.
Great.
Sorry, just before we go on to the next thing, I would like to clarify to everybody, if you could try and keep your answers as brief as possible, because especially if, not to be rude, but if some of our candidates are trying to be as brief as possible, and then other candidates are sort of going on as long as they want, because frankly we enjoy hearing from all of you, and we don't want to be rude, so we don't want to cut you off, but at the same time we do have to get through lots of questions, and we have to do,
and we've got some audience questions accumulating down below, so
we do. Yes, one thing actually, sorry for cutting across you Freddie, but Martin, apparently somebody says you were impeached at Class Act. What have you got to say about that?
I wasn't.
Okay, well then, there we go. Freddie, sorry, can you continue?
All right, let's finish this question with Richard.
Certainly. So the biggest issues, I think, is the lack of respect and the lack of beards. I mean, for me, I've been growing this beard for quite some time, and beards are hugely important. They make you look very distinguished. They can be wrongly accused of being a massive infection risk and be maligned in hospitals sometimes. They're also brilliant at making sure that your partner really loves you, because if they're going to be tickled by their beards, they come and kiss you. You know, it shows just how passionate they are about you. And yeah, it's just a really great and brilliant thing, beards, and I think that is the biggest issue. Now, for all of those who are wondering what on earth this has any relevance to the Students' Union, the problem is that the Students' Union sounds just like my tirade. there are things that sound interesting that you might have some, but actually are just so irrelevant to the student body half the time. They just go, oh yeah, that's nice, and then just totally ignore about it. And that's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Hand back to William with the question now, I think.
Thank you. Yes. So our next question is that the president of the student union has to represent all of Oxford students, no matter their background, subject, or most importantly, their political affiliation. Therefore, how will your personal politics affect your approach to the role? And how will you ensure that as the president of the student union, you are somebody who truly represents all shades of opinion and not just the small, narrow, and usually left-wing clique that usually runs the Oxford Student Union? And sorry, I need to pick somebody to go first, don't I?
I think we need to go with Rashmi this time. So
okay, yeah, start with Rashmi then.
Well, I believe that as a representative of so many students, I wouldn't be making any personal political statements in my position as president unless mandated by the student council and it has a clear vote of majority. But personally speaking, I was raised a conservative and I went somewhere left and some along the way. So that's my personal background. Just FYI, that's my answer.
Next, can we go to
Marcin?
Sorry,
Marcin would be next.
Marcin, okay, Marcin.
I think the problem here is just not that we have our individual politics, but is that we are trying to politicize every single issue. Most of the things that we can actually affect as students. So issues like rent strike, issues like representing students to the university, issues like making sure that we have proper and fair assessment are not actually party political. So I don't really see how that is relevant. So I think that that's the most important part. We shouldn't be trying to make every single issue we're talking about party political. I think that's the problem that they're having in the US. And I think that's a very bad trend. But in terms of, as a personal disclaimer, I guess, seeing that this, as Rashmi has already commented on that, I've only voted for one party in my entire life, and that was just support remaining in the EU after the Brexit vote. So I think that's something that does affect students, and that's something that definitely EU students do care about. So I'm going to say that I have voted for the Liberal Democrats in the 2019 European Union election, because I think that's something that can actually affect students. But aside from that, I don't have any political opinions that I think are relevant to anyone and the SU as a whole.
You ran to be president of ALCA, didn't you, Marcin?
I did run in ALCA and in many other student organizations, but I've actually been a member of different parties. So I've been a member of 2 different political parties in the UK, and one of them has actually been a Labour Party. So I am a moderate candidate. I've actually been in Labour for almost as long as I've been in the Conservative Party. So I am definitely sort of in the middle of the spectrum. And the only party I've actually voted for was the Liberal Democrats.
Fair enough. Steph?
Sorry, can you really quickly repeat the question?
Yes, so the president of the student union has to represent all students, no matter their political affiliation. How will your personal politics affect your approach to the role, and how do you think you can prevent your period as the president of the student union from not being one that becomes defined, as student union presidents so usually are, by pandering to a small left-wing clique?
Yeah, well, I think it's clear from national polling that students are, by and large on the left. Now, that being said, I think my policies and my policies will undoubtedly be affected by my politics. And I made it very clear that the main goal from my run and my hopeful presidency would be to put forward very strong positions, both for workers' rights and for students' rights of various sorts. So I think ideally, people from all political stripes can see that policies being put forward by my administration would be in line with their interest. But obviously you can't please everybody at the same time. That's not how politics works.
And Richard, Same question.
Well, I think I am one of the first Oxford University Students' Union presidents candidates who can say that I have not been any member of any political party, and I've been so apolitical that I've in fact both been a poll clerk at previous elections as well as a counting assistant, and I've counted election results before, which it deems you to have to be apolitical. And even better is that if you don't like my policies, which I'm not going to elucidate upon, you don't have to listen to me because I'm not going to take up a position anyway. So you can't really get much more apolitical than that.
Well summarized. Okay, so I have one more question for all four of you before we move on to some audience questions. And this time we'll start with Marcin again, and we'll go around, which is quite short. What would be your best use of the £21,000 a year that we spend on president of the SU? Where would you put that if you were in charge of it?
Well, I think I would definitely want to spend it on actually having an SU president. I think it's important for us to have someone who actually represents students. But in terms of the actual money, I would probably just spend it on the student welfare and on mental health, whether that would be on hiring more counselors for the counseling service or subscription to Headspace or any of the other things I've been promising in my manifesto. Not sure that that's as short as you want it to be.
Well, that's good. We'll go Steph.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure exactly how much over the Oxford living wage the salary is. I know that the living wage is £10.31 an hour. So if it's out of line with that, I'd immediately lower all the SAP positions to getting paid the living wage and no more, because I think that's only fair. But if it were to go into actual issues other than having paid sabbatical positions, I think, yeah, there are loads of great places the money could go to, from, staffing more counsellors, which we're in dire need of. People face weeks and weeks of wait. Anything from that to helping fund bursaries and things like this.
Cool. Rashmi now. Yeah.
Hi, I think I would want that money to go into COVID hardship fund right now, because that's something we all need, and a lot of students are in need of it. The current, I think currently the Oxford University gives up to 5,000, so I would want to raise that with this money.
Great, thank you. And finally, Richard.
Well, as tempted as I am to suggest that we could buy 70 Live Well Roseberry single riser recliners, which look like a fabulously comfortable chair, the £21,000 is interesting. If I was just going for popular votes, I would say we can spend it on the Freshers' Fair and make all of society's lives a lot easier. If I was actually thinking about what would be worth spending £21,000, I would argue that the colleges and Oxford University do quite well in funding students. Certainly the Oxford bursaries are one of the most generous out of the country. What I think they could possibly spend some more money on is actually on the counselling service, which is slightly overrun. And actually £21,000 there could actually make quite a big difference.
Great, thank you. I do actually have one more question for all of you, which is an important one, which we mustn't miss out. And I think for this one, I've sort of lost track now, but we'll start with Rashmi for this one, if that's all right. So, as you know, one candidate has already dropped out of the race due to controversy over racist jokes. Why do you feel that you're the right person to represent BAME people in Oxford and address some of the problems that face them?
Because I'm BAME.
There's nothing better than true representation. I do understand that. Marcin?
Well, I think, as I said, I'm going to actually work with leaders from different backgrounds. Obviously, I can't be everything. I can't have every single possible characteristic, but I'm going to work with presidents of societies that represent BAME students. And I'm going to make sure that everyone who is affected by, for example, racial profiling or any of the other things that we do have a lot of in Oxford can just report their problem to the SU. And then the SU is then going to intervene with the individual college concerned so that we can actually have some representation, because obviously we're going to be stronger together. And there's actually a story about it, because I was visiting some colleges before I started at Oxford. I was just let in despite just not seeing that there's a queue of people trying to pay for entrance as tourists. And after I realized that I was just let in because it looked like I belonged there, I've seen so many people who are denied getting entrance to their own college despite wearing college stash and being clearly a member of that college. I think it's just simply wrong that someone who's not even a student, as I was back then, who was just a tourist, could get into a college without paying by avoiding a queue, and someone who was actually a student wearing college stash cannot get in. So I think that's one of the most important issues, and I've been going to fight for students who are who've been abused by racial profiling and other issues like that.
Thanks, Martin. I'll go to Richard again now.
So I go one better and say that as I wouldn't exist as a president, I'm therefore doesn't really matter what I am.
Respect that, absolutely. Steph, same question for you.
Yeah, obviously the problems facing the BAME communities are manifold, both from individual incidents and recurring patterns of incidents like the ones Marston talks about, to issues of living in a colonial universities with a colonial curriculum. Why it would be best to represent those communities? It's clear that I would not. It's probably clear as the most qualified to represent them directly. But if I were to be a candidate, of course, I would amplify the voices of all those campaigns and they're heard in whatever capacity I have.
Great.
I have to admit, a lot revolve around Martin being impeached for various things. So we'll have to find a particular one of those to pick out. But Steph, first of all, I think we've got one here for you, which is you talked about exactly trying to sort of boost staff's wages and the like. But according to this person, the president of the student union doesn't actually have that power. So any attempts made by you to try and affect wage rates would simply amount to a public statement. Do you believe that simply putting out public statements of policy is a worthwhile achievement on the part of the president of the student union?
I think this kind of view is exactly the one I'm trying to combat with my whole run. You know, heads of SU have become so depoliticized that we don't understand that powers to affect wages and our conditions are directly ours. We students are incredibly powerful. Students and staff make up this university. So, I mean, of course, individually and institutionally, we do have this power. I think the question also had a bit more to say about the budget to boost staff's wages. And I think if Oxford University, with an endowment of over £6 million, does not have the money to pay its staff living wage, then it should close for business.
Interesting. Sorry, Freddie.
Sorry, would you like to continue with that, or can I offer another question up? I found.
No, yeah, get up another question.
I've got one from Harry, which is for everyone, about admissions. What do you believe we can do to make the admissions process more equal for all? Access and outreach is one issue that many students care about, and so it would be interesting to hear how the candidates would represent student views on this issue. Martin, would you like to talk about that?
Sorry, I didn't actually hear the question. I got an internet issue. Can you
what
repeat
do you
that again?
believe? Sorry, what do you believe that we can do, or you can do, to make the admissions process more equal for all? Access and outreach, Harry, it says, is very important to all Oxford students, and I think we'd all agree on that.
That's a good question. Yeah, and that's actually something I mentioned in my manifesto as well. Sorry. So I think we need to work with the university and the current programs that we are having. So for example, we need to expand the Foundation Oxford that has been pioneered by LMH, where they basically have students from disadvantaged backgrounds who do not meet the entry criteria, but who get to go to Oxford for a year. And they get in the middle like every other students to normal courses. So I think the current target is 50 students a year, and I think that's just unacceptable. So if we expand that to 200 or 300 or 400 students, who would be able to come to Oxford from disadvantaged backgrounds despite not yet having achieved the A levels that they would normally need to have. And I think that would be fantastic. And another pledge that I've made in terms of access was having a consultation on attainment gaps between different demographics. And the further last thing would be reforming the assessments that we have at Oxford. I think there's quite a significant gap in achievement between students who come from disadvantaged backgrounds in prelims or mods, and then the grades they have in the finals. So if we just make sure to bridge that gap somehow, or to just have more assessments or assessments of different kind that wouldn't have that gap, that would probably solve the problem.
Thanks, Martin. I think we'll try and get everyone on this. Rashmi, would you like to talk about it?
About
Admissions processes. So what would you do about making admissions more equal for all?
Well, I believe that most students who apply here are disadvantaged because they don't have the resources to make the kind of application that Oxford asks or expects. I mean, I didn't know how to write an SOP, and I'm not even an English, native speaker. How can I write an excellent English SOP? And I understand that the selection process is very unbiased, and then they don't see who wrote this, what their background is, and whatever. And that puts us at a disadvantage. I think the admissions process needs to change to accommodate people of all kinds of background, and they need to understand the fact that we don't have enough resources to pull this kind of thing. I mean, both my parents don't even have a university degree. They can't help me with my SOP. I was fortunate enough to have an English professor in my humanities department in one of my during my undergrad course who was kind enough to look over it for me and like suggest edits. And I know that a lot of people don't have that kind of access.
Thanks, Rashmi. That was really insightful and personal as well. Steph.
Yeah, so apart from some kind of more surface issues, like just the general understanding of what Oxford stands for and its culture, which puts people off from applying, I think that culture is generally right, and people will be more keen on applying in the first place when we as an institution can change and start positioning ourselves to be more equitable. But obviously, obviously the admissions process itself, what Oxford asks for is very stringent. It's not as it's not as flagrantly inequitous as US admissions processes, but being so strict on grades, as we've seen recently with the last COVID admissions, is not conducive to getting the most diverse types of applicants all over. Unfortunately, it's a systemic issue to do with how schools are funded, what opportunities people get. So I think the SU has to understand that it can only work on some things, which is mostly to do with what Oxford really deems necessary to be able to get the opportunity to study here, but also changing the optics and the idea of what Oxford stands for by changing it as an institution in itself.
Thanks, Steph. Richard, do you have any words on that?
Yes, I'll just make some very brief words, which is I don't think the Oxford Students' Union can do anything. I don't think I've really seen, surprisingly, unlike the Cambridge University Students' Union, which did do some good access work, I don't think that Oxford Students' Union necessarily has. But I do think that the university goes to extraordinary lengths to try their absolute best to try and get as many disadvantaged candidates in. And to try and get as many people who would be able to benefit from this education system. Regardless of that, I don't think the Oxford University Students' Union needs a paid president in order to do this work. And so it goes back to my basic point, which is I don't think there's a need for a paid president. Thank you.
Thank you. William, do you have anything for the panel?
Yes. Sorry, we've got several essentially asking Rashmi, if you spoke earlier about your dislike of the statue of Cecil Rhodes, would you abolish or seek to at least put out a statement calling for the abolition of the Rhodes Scholarship? And if so, would you also like to take away the funding it provides for 100 odd students a year?
Well, I have an answer to all the three questions. I'll very quickly go over it. For the first one, I would like to replace the Rhodes Scholarship with another scholarship where the name doesn't say Rhodes, because I'm sure like a lot of people who have graduated from Oxford and done wonderful things are dying to have their legacy back here. They would be more than willing to give that money. So I'm going to replace it, not abolish. I'm going to replace, that's the word. And another question was from Alfie. Hi, Alfie. Why do you seek a policy of decolonization when it proved such an integral role in bringing about the global world, without which billions more would still be living in absolute poverty? Well, I would like to ask you to take a tour of the museums around here in Oxford. You can see statues and objects of value which were pillaged from my country. My country was very rich, and it is developing today because it was pillaged by a colonialist rule. That's why I seek to decolonize. And one of my policies in decolonization is to decolonize the syllabi, which only celebrates white male people. I think it's about time we learn about people around the world and about women, about works of women, to make it truly global that you seek. You think decolonization can't bring, but I think decolonization is about bringing about a global world. It's about love. It's about learning about everyone and just not about what white people did. And I'm really, really sorry if I come across as negative to you, but I really, really strongly feel about this. And another question from Isaac.
Rashmi, sorry, I'm sorry to cut across you, but we do only have so much time. So I did try to sort of pick a singular question of the three to ask.
Can I reply in the chat?
Yes, you can. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's an idea. But I think we're coming actually towards the end of the hour that we had allotted to us. So we may have to, I think, wind things up here. Unfortunately, I think, are there any sort of pressing questions, Freddie, that you think we should ask before we sign off? Because I am aware that people have other things to get to. So
it is 7 o'clock. I did want to ask a question about carbon footprint in Oxford and environmentalism. If anyone would like to come forward, maybe one person who's really trying to talk about it, go for it.
I think the biggest thing that Oxford can do to help with this issue is to allow students a voice on where our money goes to. We have the Shell Oil Geosciences Lab, not to mention all the money that we invest into different types of big emitters and people who are contributing to the global climate crisis in all the various ways which they can and do. So I think that is a very clear, obvious way that Oxford can make an immediate change on that.
Sorry, can I just add upon that? Apologies for having to change window. That I think the biggest way that we can make a carbon footprint is to get a really large 3D printer and then make it out of carbon fiber and get a really huge footprint and just hang it on one of the colleges. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Rashmi or Martin, we do have a tiny bit of time. If you'd like to speak on that, you can as well.
Well, I'm doing an MSc in energy systems, so everything I studied is about decarbonizing this world. So, I mean, this is something I have so many views on, and I'm sorry, I'm going to get very technical, so I'm going to stop myself just there.
No, that's great. Martin.
Well, so firstly, I'm just going to start by saying that I completely agree with what Rashmi said before about access. As someone who's never been to an English-speaking country before coming to my Oxford interviews, I definitely see why we need to reform that. And I think that what Rashmi said about that topic definitely resonated with me. And in terms of that specific issue, I think there is not much that the student union can actually do about it. So I think it's important we are realistic and actually talk about the things that we can do as opposed to the things that we would want to see done. But I think we definitely can, what we can do is make sure that we lobby the courier service so that they don't advertise positions that are actually harming the planet, and so that we promote as the ESU disinvestment of colleges from funds that actively harm the environment. I think those are the two things that the ESU can actually do. Everything else is just wishful thinking.
Great, thank you so much. That's a really good summary from all of you. I do think that's all we have time for. Is that right, William?
Yes, I think unless any of the candidates are willing to stay slightly longer, because of course we did lose some time at the start for the sort of unforeseeable reason. But I think there's a slight comment that has just come straight through to me now, Rashmi, which is, do you believe that comparing the Rhodes Scholarship to a Hitler Scholarship is an appropriate remark to make? As strongly as you may feel on this issue, I think the suggestion that this person is making is that occasionally it could also be useful to speak softly on these issues. And we do not necessarily want the student union to become a hub of the Oxford culture wars. And so would you suggest that you stand by those comments that you made earlier?
Well, I think you should all give the will of Cecil Rhodes a read and what he said in his will, because it's a wonderful piece of literature that everybody should read. And I feel that the establishment of Rhodes Scholarship and his statues around, they kind of mitigate his history, what he's done. It's kind of like a way to patch up the kind of stuff that he's done and he was known for. And nobody did that for Hitler. Nobody erected his statues or wrote wonderful things about him or established anything about him. That's why we still remember him for what he did. But by doing things like that, we stop remembering people for what they did. And we start developing this psychology that maybe what they did was not so bad. But please do give his will a read. It's wonderful.
Can I actually comment on that as well? Sorry, I think I have something to say.
Yes, and I think if we've also just got slightly more time, Martin, could you also answer, were you impeached by the Oxford Student Union LGBT campaign?
Yeah, so that actually I have left the LGBT campaign shortly before they were themselves denounced by Plash. And I think they were denounced, and the reason that I've left is that the committee was just a toxic environment that was harmful to my mental health. And I definitely stand by the statement that Plash has made at the time, and I do not regret leaving. As an LGBT person myself, I'm obviously committed to those issues. I'm not going to deny the work that the current LGBT campaign and the LGBT society are doing. That's terrific work. It's just personal issues with specific people who were involved in the committee at the time, which was 2 years ago. And can I just also make a comment about the Rhodes statue? I think that would be something where I can contribute a bit.
Okay.
So I think the problem is that we're focusing on the wrong things. We're focusing on some Rhodes statues where we have a huge Rhodes House building that's actually, I think, bigger than my own college. And someone who's coming from a college that was previously a female college, which is still currently underfunded. Every single time I go to the city center, I see this huge Rhodes House. And I can imagine that people who are coming from minority backgrounds also have exactly the same kind of a feeling. But we can't actually rename it just by university decision. The only way to change that trust and that will is by an act of parliament. And that actually has been done before to include the admission of women to the Rhodes Scholarship. So I think the only reasonable thing that DSU can actually do about the issue is not just issuing different open letters and just talking about something without having any impact on it. It would be to just campaign parliament to have another act that would effectively allow to rename either the trust or the house or the scholarship itself as well. But that's the only thing that we can actually do, as opposed to just saying that we should rename it by ourselves, which is just not legally possible.
Well, I guess you had it here first. The president of the student union might not be able to enact change in Oxford, but Boris Johnson can. And I think on that note, we are pretty much at the end of the questions that we have. So I would just like to say thank you all for coming to speak at the state. It's been a very entertaining and interesting debate. I think we've had a nice range of questions that have touched upon many different subjects. I think have given us each an insight into what each of you would bring to this all-important role. And for those of you watching, and indeed for those of you participating, do remember that voting opens tomorrow, the 9th of February at 8 AM and runs until this Thursday, the 11th of February at 6 PM. And links will be available to vote.
Don't miss out.
Don't miss out.
You've
Exactly.
had it here. You've got no reason
Freddie,
not to vote. We've had some fantastic people on this evening, and
yeah, Freddie, what would you like to add before we sign off then?
I would say quickly, to make this a bit of a circular storyline, I think you all showed us a really nice time this evening. Thank you so much, and it was a lot better than the American presidential debates of before Christmas. So that's all I wanted from this. So fantastic job. Thank you very much, and it was lovely to meet all of you.
Yeah, so and I echo all of Freddie's words, and if we've learned anything tonight, it's that there's far more to the student union than just free condoms and crap radio. So with that, thank you all very much for coming, and
thanks everyone.
Goodbye.
Yeah, thank you guys. Goodbye.